Aye, kuwe kuwa madue.
Aye, kuwe kuwa madue.
Aye, kuwe kuwa madue.
Aye, kuwe kuwa madue.
My name is Baba Gerald Green.
Pleasure to have you, and we're so glad to be talking with you today. And I just want to know about your life and some of the things that have happened to you. So we're just going to get started real easily. And first, where did you grow up?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York. My father was in the Navy. He was a photographer, and every 3 years we moved to a different city. My first remembrance of where I lived was Norfolk, Virginia. I lived in Norfolk in a segregated community called Chesapeake Gardens, which is still there. It was all black when I lived there. It's now gorgeous. I lived in Washington, D.C., San Diego, Lexington Park, Maryland. So I grew up basically on the East Coast and the West Coast. Every 3 years we move.
Wow. What was that like, just having to move constantly? Was it hard to make friends? Was it just tough to get acclimated to your new surroundings, especially going from coast to coast?
Yeah, you know, children are very adaptive. And so, just like a lot of kids, a lot of people my age tell me when they grew up, I didn't realize I was poor, you know, because everyone was pretty much the same. So it's similar in the Navy, well, as military-dependent kids. We lived in communities pretty much where people were the same. People moved around a lot. In terms of making friends, I made friends and I made enemies. It was kind of funny in a way because 3 years came by, I said, well, I know I'm getting out of here now, go to a different place. But it made, the one thing it taught me, the best lesson it taught me was that white people were not inherently smarter than me. Because I went to school at an early age, integrated schools. And so that was a good lesson to learn very early in life.
Wow. And you mentioned one of the neighborhoods you grew up in Norfolk, it was segregated, I think.
Yeah, Chesapeake Gardens, it's still there. My grandparents moved there in probably 1951. And my understanding, it was built by a black developer. And these are the kind of things that you don't hear a lot about now. A black person built these houses. Wow. They were modest, you know, 2 or 3 bedroom homes. And they were all sold to black people. And one thing about segregation during the 50s, you felt safe because your grandparents, your uncles and aunts, they all told you what could happen if you ventured too far out. So you stayed within your own little community. So that was, it was a great time to grow up.
That's interesting. And were some of the schools you're going to also segregated?
When I started off in Norfolk, yes. But Washington, D.C., I went to a school, I think it's still there, it's called Patterson. It was integrated. The school that sticks out the most to me was a school in San Diego. We moved to San Diego in 1959. I was in the 5th grade. My 6th grade teacher, Mr. Robert Matthews, he just recently died. He was the first black male teacher I had, one of the few. And he really helped me understand that academically I could be the best. And after the 6th grade, I stayed on the honors roll or dean's list, whatever you said, because of my experience having him as a teacher. And when I talked to him later in life, he said that he was given a free hand to try his own style of teaching method. And a lot of people my age would come back and talk to him because he had that much of an impact. Wow. But most of the schools I went to were integrated.
That's interesting.
When we moved back to Maryland, we moved back to Maryland in '63, and I went to a school. I was in the 8th grade. When I went to the 9th grade, I was in a high school in Lexington Park, Maryland. The high school was in a little small community called Great Mills. It's still there. Great Mills High School. The most racist, nastiest group of white folks I ever met.
Oh, wow.
And what they did for me was, because I already knew they weren't smarter than me, I put this academic chip on my shoulder. And I said to myself, okay, you guys can be nasty as you want. I'm going to be smarter than you. And that also was a kind of a turning point, because I had very little support from teachers. Very few, I wonder what some of the white, they called themselves my friends. Very few, if any, ever stood up for me. They call you. I grew up in the 9th grade. I thought my nickname was nigger.
Wow.
And that's just how frequent, and they throw shit at you. I'm talking about some nasty white folks. But, young, you live through that stuff, and I knew they weren't any smarter. And the other thing you learn is, as a black man growing up, I have a little bit of advantage because in the 9th grade, maybe I was 5'10". When I came back for the 10th grade, going to the 11th grade, I was about 6 foot.
Okay.
So, and I weigh about 170 now, because I've come down in weight, and I was up to about 170 then. So I was, for a high school, I was pretty good size.
Yeah.
And so I learned then that white folks tend to be, unless there's a bunch of them, they tend to be cowards, because one-on-one, they're not going to want to mess with you. Even though I was not a fighter, there was just a perception that they thought I could do that.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Were you playing any sports at the time?
That's funny. We moved from Lexington Park back to San Diego in 1966. I was a junior in high school. And all the jocks came up to me, "Oh, you gonna play football for us?" I said, "Man, I don't like getting hit. Are you gonna play basketball for us?" And I said, "I can't shoot." I'm serious. I like swimming.
There you go.
But, so no, I'm not an athlete. I mean, phrase it differently. I did not play competitive athletic sports in high school. It was funny. I can still see the disappointment on their face. Here's this tall, kind of slender brother. And I said, "Man, I don't like getting hit. I don't play no football." And I damn so couldn't shoot. So, no, I did learn how to swim, and I still swim. I love swimming.
That's good. Well, you found something that you could stick with, and it's carried you throughout life, that's
that's what you want.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you want to find something that don't tear up your knees.
Right. Yeah.
Because I have a lot of friends my age, man, they get knee replacements and hip replacements. And a lot of them athletes, or former athletes, they got beat up as a kid growing up.
Football and basketball will definitely do that to you, to impact your whole body that way. So I guess in some ways it's good. I mean, swimming, you can exercise, you can do have a lot more from there. So that's excellent.
Thank you.
Yep. So what would you say impacted you the most as a child?
My grandfather. My grandfather, he taught me at a very early age the value of work. I was maybe first grade. I was somewhere around that age, and he had his own custodial service. Oh, wow. His niche was cleaning churches, white people's churches. And so he taught me how to put chairs up, take them down, learn how to use the buffing machine. And for all that labor I would do, he'd give me 50 cents. So I learned early, you work, you get paid. And you have to be willing to work. So that was, the other, I learned much later in life that he really was a very gracious person. I met people who met him, who knew him, and said, he helped them a lot. So that's what he did for me. He really made me the person I am.
Excellent. What would be some advice you would give to your younger self?
I was thinking about that over breakfast this morning, and I think the best advice I could give to my younger self is be willing to read and study more. Because my younger self, I didn't go back to school till I was 25. I did not want to study. I was good at math, so the things I was good at, but if I was willing to put more hours, and that's what I would tell anyone, be willing to put time in studying, read at least a book a month, that's not asking too much. So that's what I would tell my younger self. That, and learn to take better risks, more qualified risks, and be patient. So those.
Okay. Yeah, that seems like all those things would come in handy.
Yes.
Handy. Now, you spoke earlier just about dealing with a lot of the racism as you're going through school and from name calling and just kind of that type of bullying and speaking about having to be this kind of smarter and doing it within that instance by letting your grades speak for you rather than trying to fight everyone and stuff like that. But what would you say are some lessons that you've learned about, I guess, Black society and things as you were coming up and living in so many different communities?
I'm going to do a comparison.
Okay.
When I was in the 50s living in the segregated Norfolk, Virginia, we could stay in our community. We had doctors, the pharmacy, everything was there, and there were Black folks who operated it, which in turn, the dollar you spent circulated more and it stayed in your community. And that's because of segregation. We were forced to live that way. When integration came about, unfortunately, the economics changed. Black folks started taking their dollars and spending them elsewhere. So, to me, we're trying to go back to where we once were in terms of having our dollars, which means our folks, young kids, have to be educated to provide the services that we want. So that would be.
That certainly makes a difference. And what would you say would be either top 3 things that you found may be the most harmful to the Black community? You just mentioned how integration changed the economics of the neighborhood.
I think probably one of the most harmful is lack of self-love. If you love your brothers and sisters like you love yourself, you wouldn't want to do as much harm to them. And then Carter Woodson wrote a book called The Miseducation of the Black Man. And Lord knows we have been miseducated to the utmost, to the point where we don't like each other. But, when you travel in the South, Black folks try to put the South down, but the historically Black colleges have done a great job in educating folks. Unfortunately, it's kind of like Nigeria. Nigerians come here, get educated, they don't go back home. They stay here. Black folks from the South get educated, some stay, but a lot of them venture out because it's greener. I don't blame folks for wanting to leave, but they're leaving a place that really nurtured them. That's one of the reasons why my wife and we're going to relocate. We're moving to Florida next month.
Oh wow! Very soon. Very soon. Okay.
Yeah.
You got your place picked out. Well, just speaking about that, what would you say, being Black, what does that mean to you in America right now in 2021? What is that? Has your perception of that changed over the years, or how do you feel about that? Just
being Black. Yeah. It's something that requires, again, having self-love will help you persevere through some of the, hopefully give you compassion to want to work with as we persevere through some of these changes. I'm old enough to recall how, the different civil rights walks and stuff, how we thought things were going to change. But it seems like what has changed the most is the conservative white folks have figured out another way to refuse opportunity. You look at Oakland, and not just Oakland, inner city schools, they aren't that great. So be willing, that's one of the things that I try to do as a person, is to volunteer to help, work with folks, doing what I can to help them lift up so that our communities can be stronger. We have some very talented young folks in our communities. Unfortunately, they want to not work hard and get paid. So that's.
How do you think we can fix a lot of these issues that are in our communities that you're talking about?
People like you, myself, volunteering our time to share what we know and learn with other folks. That's how I met my wife, through volunteerism.
Oh, wow.
I tell folks, even if you're trying to learn a new craft, you volunteer, you do something that you're not familiar with, and next thing you know, you have a few hours in it, you can add that to your resume. But it requires the foresight to do something with the understanding you're not going to get paid, but with the expectation that you can be able to use that knowledge. And I think that's part of what stymies some people, because they don't want to do anything unless they get paid. And so that's something, a workaround that we will have to. And I understand in some cases, in all cases, people need to have a standard of living. And I feel like I'm just running my mouth.
Oh, no, we're here to hear from you.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad. And you spoke on this a little bit, but I'm interested too. You mentioned your grandfather having a big impact on you, and just some of the lessons that you've got from him, just in terms of working hard and learning kind of a value of what you're doing and skills. Were there any other lessons that you picked up from your family? Maybe I know you mentioned earlier too that your father was in the Navy and then also was doing photography, but that you didn't necessarily gravitate to photography. It wasn't an interest of you.
I didn't gravitate toward photography, but when my father passed, my brother and I, he was living in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. That's right outside of Tulsa. And I said, David, look at this garage. And the garage was very orderly. It had tools, and he had worked on cars. And, it wasn't a garage in disarray. And I said that to David because we both have garages. And my brother's garage is a little more organized than mine. But, that's something that we picked up. The fact that you do work and you take care of your equipment. That's one thing I did pick up from my father, was that don't be afraid to do hard work. And he also taught me in an inverse kind of way. My father was a first-class petty officer in the Navy, so the next rank would be chief. And in the Navy, our military, you have to take a test to get promoted up. Well, my father didn't graduate from high school. He took the GED. And when he was taking the test for the chief, being a photographer, he had to know elementary chemistry. And at the particular time, I was taking Chem 1A in high school. And so the chemistry I was taking in high school was the type of chemistry that was on his test. So I was trying to help him with his test, but because, chemistry is one of the kind of classes that it isn't just all textbook. You do textbook and you do lab, and the lab reinforces the textbook. And then you have these aha moments, and so that held him back. He never made chief because he could do the work, but he couldn't do the work on paper, the chemical analysis. And so that was another part that I picked up was, we have to become educated. Not that my father wasn't educated, it's just that he didn't have the paper education that was needed to pass particular tests in the military. My father worked hard. With all his faults and stuff, but he did believe in working hard.
I hear that. Did you ever want to go into military service?
No. No. When I was growing up, the Vietnam War, I graduated from high school in 1967.
Wow.
And I never wanted to be in the service because watching my father go through that, the service is all about subordination. And everyone's subordinated to someone. And when we lived in Maryland, my father was subordinate to a lot of rednecks. And there's nowhere in the world I'm volunteered to be subordinated to these rednecks. But he had no choice. That was the life he was in. So no, I never wanted to be in the service. I never wanted to be a firefighter, and never wanted to be a cop. Those were the three things I took off the table when I started looking for a gainful employment.
I hear that. Well, what got you into your career? Was the interest just because of the math, or just some of the other work that you were good at, and you found a path that way?
It's one of those. I used to work for Chevron. Chevron used to own and operate gas stations called Standard Stations Incorporated. And I had got promoted from the gas station to an executive type office job when I was in my early 20s. And because of my math skills, and there was a trait that's unique to that particular area that I was very good at. It's called reading a stick. It's about how much gas is sold from the tank in the ground. I was very good at calculating that. And so when I got promoted, I went from a union job to a non-union job, and they said, well, if you don't take your vacation, you will lose your 2 weeks vacation. Oh, you got to train this white guy over here before you take your vacation. So I trained him, and they gave him my job.
What?
He had a math degree, and I said, well, he had a math degree from some school in Pennsylvania, but he gave me my job. Now that shit that pissed me off. But I kept telling myself, I deserve to be treated better than this, and I was smarter than that guy. So when I went back to school, my attitude was, who make the most money with the least education? That was my criteria I was going to go to school with. And I was 25 at the time, so I went to Merit, and I was going to be an accountant, and that didn't work out. And so I picked up on mechanical engineering. There's a particular type of mechanical engineer that I started out studying, but that's not what I graduated. But there was an engineer called petroleum engineer, and they're still one of the highest paid. They're not the highest, but they're extremely well paid. They work with refineries, exploration of oil, which might be obsolete pretty soon. Excuse me. So that's what I chose, and I started in 1975, I was 25, and I graduated in 1982. I took the scenic route.
There you go. There you go.
But yeah, so I've worked at PG&E as I was what they call a gas engineer. PG&E has gas storage fields out by Tracy, and that was my area. That was my major area of expertise.
Interesting. Now, is that what brought you out to the Bay? Was doing this type of work, or were you already out here? And
No, I used to work for the Navy down in San Diego, and I quit that job to go to a dental school, and the dental school didn't work out. So I dropped out of the dental school and became anyway, I didn't go to school for a while, but that's what brought me up here. It was a little disappointing because the dental school was not what I thought it was going to be. But, that's when you have to learn how to accept some setbacks and defeat and, regroup and move on.
Yeah, that's true. And you try to, it sounds like a bunch of kind of different careers, accountant, dentist, dentistry, and just trying to figure out where your niche was and what worked.
Yeah. I didn't work in those fields, but those are things that I considered studying. And it got to the point as you get a little older, I said, well, you start saying, I need to make some money. I mean, I'm fortunate to live in this type of system. Yeah, you want to be comfortable, you have to make some money. And
that's true.
So when I graduated, I applied for a couple of jobs, more than a couple. I got hired at PG&E. There's a company up in Sacramento called Aerojet. I interviewed with them, and the summer prior to interviewing with them, I worked for Westinghouse Marine Division, and I worked around the Trident submarines, the Trident missile systems.
Wow.
And so when I went up to Aerojet, they had a contract to refurbish the Polaris missile. There was Polaris, then the Trident. So the Polaris is an older system. And so I'm in this guy's office looking around, and the project management tool that they use was something I was very good at and familiar with. And so I'm looking at it's called a Tier 3 diagram. So I'm looking at it, and he comes in to the office and looks at me, and he introduced himself, and I introduced myself, and he asked me, do you know what you're looking at? I said, yeah, it's a Tier 3 diagram. And he looked at me and said, how do you know that? I said, I worked at Westinghouse Marine Division last summer, and that's what we use on the Trident missile system. And he was surprised. And then the other question they asked was, because you need clearance to work at this job. He says, have you ever had clearance before? I said, yeah. And where? I said, in the Navy. When I worked down in San Diego, and I worked down there, I had top secret, because I've worked around a lot of top secret equipment. So that was another thing that kind of floored him. And so, but the job required someone who could get clearance, and if you've had clearance, it's easy to get it, to get it again, supposedly. At least it was then. And so that was on a Friday. I went there on a Friday. They made me an offer. The guy said, I would make you an offer before you leave.
Wow.
And they did.
Wow.
They did, because, and I told somebody, I said, well, I was the third, I knew they had to hire a black person, so I was the third one that went up there. I said, that's my job. So they made me the offer. I said, I had to think about it. Now, I graduated in May, and this was maybe in September. I'm really hungry for a job. And I said, I have to think about it. And I went home, and that Monday morning, PG&E called me. And so when they called, my response was, hey, I paid my bill. And they said, no, we're calling. We're not calling for you for that. We're going to make you a job offer. So their job offer was a little higher than, was a lot higher than Aerojet. And I told Aerojet, and Aerojet sweetened their pie, but they couldn't match PG&E. But I often wonder what my life would have been like if I ended up working at Aerojet up in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it probably been okay. I probably would not have met my wife, because I met her as a volunteer at PG&E.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she was the executive director of the San Francisco Historical and Cultural Society, and I volunteered with her group. I'm a member of the Black Engineers, and there was another group, Black folks called Inventors International. We wrote a book on Black inventors.
Wow.
And so I did most of the research. But that's how I met her. And this October will be 30 years that we've been married.
Wow, that's beautiful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Now, I'm curious, you just mentioned you doing the research for this or on other Black research. What was that like?
Well, this was, I forget what year it was. It must have been 82. There is, the Carnegie Woodson people put out, they share information, say, this is going to be the target of what we're going to look at for this particular year. In the year that we chose, they had a list of inventors, and they just had the names. And so we had that list, and my job was to take the list they had and find as many of the patents that these folks had invented. So some folks had a lot of patents, some folks just had one or two. And the patents that I thought were the most interesting, I would go dive a little further and get more information. There's a patent library in Sunnyvale, so I would spend a lot of time in Sunnyvale looking up the patents. And so, and one of the guys from Inventors International, his name was Paul Brown. He invented a toy that you probably played with. He invented the self-correcting gyroscopic top.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Brown invented that. And when he invented it, he was a draftsman for some company. And he made toys because he grew up in an orphanage and he didn't have any. So that was his motivation to make toys. And so when he came with this self-correcting gyroscopic top, he made enough money on that, so he eventually quit his job. And so he was highly motivated to work with us. And
That's interesting.
putting together people who had patents. Unfortunately, most black folks who had patents don't reap the financial reward from the patent. A lot of black folks end up selling their patent to someone else because they could not get the financial backing to make that patent, just like shoes. A guy named Metzner invented the shoelacing machine. This was in the Boston area. But he couldn't make any money on it, so he ended up selling his patent pretty cheap to a company. And that's why one time a lot of shoes made in the Boston area because of his machine.
Wow. Oh,
He couldn't get the financial backing. And that's the ugly side of capitalism. You refuse black folks who are talented access to capital. It's changing a little bit now, but not much.
Yeah, it's just very backwards thinking, particularly when it's something that can benefit everyone, and you just don't want to, for one racist reason or another, not even wanting to invest in that or put money behind it, and consider it more of a risk, quote unquote.
Or the other part is they don't want to see a black person make that kind of money.
Yeah, that too. That too.
Yeah.
That's definitely a big part of it. I can see that. Well, and I'm curious, I'm just going to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
How did you get involved or hear about the Brotherhood of Elders Network?
Brotherhood of Elders. I have a good friend, Arnold Perkins. Arnold and I go back. I met Arnold probably in 83, 84. And he was one of the brothers who started it. Him and some other folks. And so one day he asked me if I would come, if I'd be willing to come to a retreat. And when it first started out, the Brotherhood of Elders was just elders. You had to be, when I joined, you had to be at least 60 years old. I think I just turned 60. And, you know, so I'm a big believer in black folks trying to help black folks. And that's what I kind of saw in the Brotherhood of Elders. And at that particular time, we was at the retreat. We went around the room and we asked how the folks ended up getting to the meeting or the retreat. And about everyone there just about said Arnold Perkins. So that's how I got to the Brotherhood of Elders. And so I've been a member, I'm 60, I'm 72, so about 12 years. Wow. And, you know, I've seen the Brotherhood morph and change. Now we're our intergenerational group, and which is much better. I think it's good that each generation kind of works with a group and see how we can be supportive. And so that's how I became a member.
Interesting. And how would you say the Brotherhood of Elders Network has impacted your life or had maybe any changes in your life, something that you've noticed? You mentioned it being starting off mostly elders and then becoming intergenerational now. But is there anything, like you mentioned the retreat, is there anything that had like a lasting impact on you from joining?
Well, I guess the biggest impact for me, and this is something one of my guiding principles, I believe that we should be willing to volunteer to serve. And the Brotherhood of Elders has provided me that opportunity. You know, I used to be the chair of the education committee, been chair of different committees. I'm on the health and wellness committee now. But it gave myself and it offers other folks the opportunity to serve and learn how to work with other folks. And I was talking to Cole this morning. When you're working with folks and you're trying to get volunteers to do stuff, you can't order folks. You can't beat them over the head and make them do stuff. You know, you have to develop an atmosphere that creates that they want to do this just as much as you want them to do this. And that takes the art. And the Brotherhood is very good at helping people understand how to work collaboratively together. You know, when COVID-19 struck, there's a group we call ourselves the African American Rapid Response Circle. I've been a part of that. Out of that, there's a medical group called Umoja Health. Now, I was one of the founding members with Umoja Health. Umoja Health started with tests, doing COVID-19 tests, bringing tests to the community because people in the black community and the Latino community were not trusting of other folks coming in. Right. And so Umoja Health has grown. You know, I don't participate on the regular, you know, they still go out and do stuff on the weekends. I just don't have that time. But I'm still part of that coordinating effort. You know, so, you know, there are a lot of good things that is coming out of the Brotherhood. And one of the things that I haven't been involved a lot, but to some degree I have, is the Marcus Garvey plan, where we're trying to raise money so the money can be reinvested in the black community to improve the black community. Wow. So that's, and being around like-minded men, elderly and younger, you know, it's a good opportunity, because one of the things that I don't like hearing people saying is, that'll never happen, or the people who are the naysayers who say this won't happen. And I said, well, what are you doing to try to make it happen? You know, one of the programs the Brotherhood worked on, Devon Bowden had a program still exists, I think, in Richmond. They were called the shooters. These were young folks who were actively killing each other, and he started pulling them together to have meetings and to know each other, and they were given a stipend. So it kind of goes against what policing says. Why would you want to pay criminals not to be criminals? But that's kind of the model. And we were brought in as to be part of the elders, the people who would talk with them, to try to build trust. And so I think that's one of the things that the Brotherhood of Elders has established itself as a trust agent. You know, the City Hall, you know, the brothers who were in the Brotherhood of Elders, Arnold being one, Joe Brooks, they have a pretty good reputation in the Bay Area. You know, they've worked with some of the nonprofit foundations, and so when they put their name and they bring, you know, other folks with them, they're listened to. So that's and I'm happy that I've been able to do my part. I mean, we're all. You ever watch that's older than you? There was a commercial called. It was a 20 mule team. I think they were selling borax, some type of soap powder, but they had all these horses, and so we're all kind of like horses pulling this big wagon. That's kind of what we're doing, but we're doing it because that's what we want to do.
It's very important, very important work.
Yeah.
And I did want to ask, when you brought up the Shooters program and just getting a chance to actually speak with a lot of you know, these young men that, you know, they're been impacted by violence or maybe committing violent acts themselves and getting stopped. What was it like speaking with them?
There was one young man in particular. We had a program one day. It was like a meet and greet. And Greg Hodge was there taking pictures, and this brother, I don't want anybody taking my picture. And I can understand that. And then, I can't think of the young man's name, very, you know, to himself, and you could tell that he was upset. And he says, "Don't be taking my picture. Don't be taking my picture." So I wouldn't take his picture. And then, during the process of this game, before that I was sitting there, he says, "Y'all can't teach me shit." I said, "Okay, we can't teach you shit." And we went through this interactive, kind of a meet and greet interactive game, and the man started smiling. He started smiling, and I said, "Well, I guess we can teach you something, huh?" And he started laughing then. Yeah. So seeing that, that was part of the that program. The other thing I've been very involved with is the mentoring center. I don't know if you're familiar with the mentoring center. There was a guy named Martin Jacks. He's unfortunately he died too early. He had a program. I'm trying to think exactly what it was called, but his mentoring wasn't one-on-one. It was one-to-many, and through his program, I met a young man named Mutu. Unfortunately, Mutu died. They're having this service tomorrow. And I've worked with a lot of young folks through the mentoring center. So going up to Richmond I wasn't a stranger to that, although the people in Richmond, they were the same age. They had probably a little more violent history than the folks we had at the mentoring center at that time, because they were a little bit younger. But, you know, we have to be willing to reach out and help our young people. Yeah. And let them see that you can be successful by not being a criminal. You don't have to be a criminal and make that type of money in order to be successful. And I think that goes a long ways for our people.
I think so.
Especially if you're willing to help and share with them, you know, through the mentoring center, I've helped so many people learn how to read drawings. I mean, I just do a lot of that stuff. So, you know, so I'm willing to help. You know, if you show that you want to learn, yeah. So.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And I think sometimes that disconnect comes from maybe one generation that's willing to teach but doesn't necessarily see the students there, and then the students being kind of hesitant, or younger folks being more hesitant to even ask
Right.
because they've maybe been rebuffed before. Or in your case, when you were talking about when you were going through a lot of your schooling, just having a lot of teachers that weren't really receptive to helping you in that type of way.
Right. And the other part is in working with young folks. I've had different brothers through the mentoring center. They want people to respond to information. They want people to respond to information a certain way. And when they don't, the person who's sharing information gets upset and says, "I'm gonna take my ball and go home." You know, so you have to be willing to accept the fact that not everybody is going to pick up and do the way that you think they should do it.
Right.
You know, and so that's really a big issue.
Yeah.
You know, letting folks learn, because some folks, I mean, I'm a father, my son, he's still learning lessons, and he said, "Dad, now I understand when you told me." I said, "Yeah, well, you know, 3-4 years later, but he's still."
Yeah.
So that's, you know, you have to be open to that.
No, but that's very true. And
Yeah.
just speaking about some of that wisdom, what would you say it would be some wisdom you'd like to share with the next generation or some youth that you have a chance? What something you'd like them to know?
Yeah. Never give up.
Never give up.
You know, and you think that we or you have it hard. You know, read some of your history books. I mean, some of those land grant colleges, Howard's not one of them, but, you know, some of the historically black colleges, black folks gave everything they had to buy lumber so this school could be built, knowing that it's not going to make them smarter, but their kids or their kids' kids. So they had that type of foresight. You know, and I think that's something that, I guess what I'm saying is, everything is not instantaneous. You know, we live in a light switch environment, but you have to learn how to accept things that move a little bit slower. And that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard. And, you know, you have to accept being knocked back a few times. You know, I think anyone who's worked professionally around white folks will say, "Well, yeah, I trained this person, and I thought I was going to get the job, and they gave the job to him." That happens. It probably happens a lot now, but maybe I don't know how much it happens now because I'm not in the workplace. But I've seen my share of that. Yeah. So you do a workaround. You do a workaround, and it helps to have people like us, you and I, and Cole over there, to help our young folks do workarounds, as opposed to picking up a gun and going to shoot somebody.
Yeah. Indifference. Is there anything else that you would like to share, or you think that folks would like to know, or just to share with our audience?
Well, there was one piece that you talked about, it was in a question, was about black history or something. And I crossed the word black and I said African. Because when I was in college, one of the famous theorems that physics and math teachers teach is called Pythagoras' theorem.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Pythagoras was this Greek guy who studied in Egypt, and like all the other Greeks, they studied in Egypt and they learned this information, but white folks in America and Western culture are very good at starting history with Greece. Well, history didn't start with Greece.
Right.
And only through reading a lot will you understand that the folks prior to Greece were the masters.
Yeah.
And just think about, I'm not a mason. Masons are bricklayers, but that's where it comes from. The Masonics. White people, they have co-opted that and they make it theirs, but they weren't the inventors of this stuff.
Right.
And so, and that's one of the things that they use, Western culture use against us. They say that, well, you guys never did anything. Well, that's not true.
Right.
But if you only read their history books, you might believe that. So my thing is, educate yourself. Yeah. And there's a lot of books. There's a lot of material out there. And notice I say books. That means you have to read.
That's right.
You have to read, and unfortunately, a lot of folks don't want to read. But, you know, so that's my, I believe that we should read. And, you know, when I moved to the Bay Area, this was back during the, people had, they call it study groups. People studied together.
Yeah.
That was a pretty common occurrence in the Bay Area then. You know, people would come to, they would have studies now, depending on what you were studying, but that was something that we did. And, you know, it can happen again.
I hear that. Well, Barbara Green, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you coming out and sharing your truths and your history with us.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed the opportunity.
Absolutely.
It's good to be the first, so I'm the benchmark.
Yes. The bar has been set very high.
Yeah, well, we'll see. They may say it's set low. But anyway, I've done it.
Well, thank you.
And
Thank you
it's
so
been my
much.
pleasure. I really, you know, you did a good job. It's very, very relaxing. You know, you got these bright lights on.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you. We're happy we're able to do this and get you here today. And so much wisdom you share with us. So we appreciate it.
Well, we must share.
Yeah.
We must share.